then upload it.
Okay, great. So wait just a few minutes. So what's the total count that we should have, Eric?
I just got an IM from Ryan. Apparently he's having an issue. So hold on a sec here.
Okay. I can't tell us, Hashim, is that a slide tackle or is that W? Oh no, that's MME. Right? Your profile picture. I couldn't tell if it was soccer and a slide tackle, if it was professional wrestling, but now I look.
Yeah, that's Brazilian
Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, it looks like Ryan's in. Let me check
the actual
meeting head count here. Well, we had 7 respond yes, 2 no's, and 7 never responded. So we've at least got those 7 in here, if not more. So
Got it. And who are the no's?
let's see. Those are PMs, Maria and Zainab.
Oh, perfect. That's fine. That's fine. So are we at quorum? Are we at correct count?
Yeah. Let's see here. Too many windows, got to bounce back over. Yeah, we got what 12 in here. That's more than responded yes. So
okay, perfect. Perfect. Great. So we'll get started.
Looks like the bulk of the developers are here.
Fantastic. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining. So this session is entitled, what is it entitled? Scalable Developer Workflow or Development Workflow. So so I'm already recording. Let me share my screen. Share screen. And by the way, I'm going to be asking you guys questions. So if I ask a question, just unmute and just say the answer. You don't have to, I know there's a raise hand thing in Zoom. We don't need to use that. Just if you have the answer, just shout it out. Okay. Great. So I'm going to switch to presentation mode. Okay. Can everyone see a big green screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Fantastic. So yeah, so this is like LaunchGood 4.0, scaling. That's the big thing, right? So, my disclaimer here is everything we're talking about, again, remember that the things that were done in the past and the things that got us to where we are today, those were all the right things to do. Clearly they were the right things, or LaunchGood would not be working on $1 billion total funds raised, right? So I just want everyone to keep that in mind. This is taking the team to the next level. Right now we're at what, Eric? 10 engineers, 12 engineers? How many total? 10? You're on mute, I think, probably, Eric, if you're saying something.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I believe that's about right.
Okay. So yeah, so we're at 10 now, but it's quite conceivable on the way to 2 billion. We're going to be 2 or 3 times that, right? So the way we do things in the past is not going to work on the way to doubling and tripling the size of the team. Or even where we are now. I think everyone will agree we're already hitting at the limits of what our current process and the way we're doing things can scale, and we're getting jammed, right? So we want to get unjammed. So here's the things we're going to cover, true to the agenda that I sent out. So we'll take them in order. So first of all, just generally, I want to talk about change control. So what are some things that come to mind with change control, keeping in mind? So just start a little bit with a formal definition. This is the only area where I go into any formal definition, so don't space out on me. So change control, technically speaking, it's part of it's a subset of quality management systems. There's theory, there's people who earn PhDs and get tenured positions at universities to research this stuff and right. So change control, this is a formal discipline. Okay. So related to change control, what are some things that we think, if we use change control properly, what are some objectives or goals we would have, and what are some things we'd want to prevent? Some answers, please. Unmute and just shout out. What do you guys think? What would be our goal? Go ahead. Go ahead, whoever unmuted, please. You're on the air, caller. Go ahead, caller. Live from Brooklyn, New York.
Sorry about that. I had to dial in through my phone as well as the video.
No worries. Oh, yeah, I think anyone can. Yeah, anyone can unmute, right? So, what types of changes would we want to prevent? And what would be some of our objectives for change control? Just brainstorming here. Come on, guys. It's afternoon already. Everyone should be awake. Who didn't have their coffee? Let's go. Let's go.
I guess like any breaking changes in terms of database schemas, migrations, anything that could just cause other things to be broken.
Absolutely. That's the obvious one, right? Like, don't break stuff. We don't want to break stuff. So we want to prevent changes that break things. What else? What other kind of changes? So that's probably the most important and the most evident ones. Like, don't break things. What else? What other kind of changes? What do we want to prevent?
Could it be to prevent changes to files that, as in multiple people can't be working on the same sort of stuff at the same time? Prevent those changes.
Bravo. So we don't want to undo other people's work or make other people's life a little preview of Jahannam, right? We want to avoid undoing other people's work. Very, very, very astute point. Absolutely. What else? Anything else? Well, I'll give them to you. Unnecessary changes. That's maybe the more difficult one. We don't want to do work that's actually not necessary, right? So part of change control system is we want to be rigorous about before we actually make the change, to know what we're changing, how it should be changed, and the criteria for how the change will be accepted, et cetera, as well as prevent changes that break stuff. And then don't make other people's life difficult. Don't undo the work of others. And the reason we want to do that, of course, is overall the LaunchGit ecosystem. We want to reduce overall the negative impact that could possibly have for the users of LaunchGit. We want to reduce the amount of times we have to go do a bunch of work and then undo the work because it wasn't right, because it was conflicted, et cetera, right? And then finally, most importantly, we want to maximize the productivity of the team. Like, there's so much cool stuff we can be building. We don't want to waste any time on just moving things around. We just want to move as fast as possible, deliver the maximum value. So we get to build a lot of really, really cool stuff that delivers amazing value to the Ummah, right? That's what we want to do. Okay. So these are the formal steps. This is change control theory, right? I won't go through these, but this presentation is mostly focused on build and test and a little bit close, mostly build and test. Okay. And just as a note, technically a change control system can be formal or informal. Certainly, just like having Mariam, for example, we say our change control process is she just gives a thumbs up or thumbs down. We get on a call and we look at her thumbs up or thumbs down. That would be a change control process, right? So a couple of things regarding when we make changes. These are some pretty important things when we see like we've pushed changes to the server. We want to very, very quickly be able to ask and assess, is there something that used to work that we've not accidentally broken, but intentionally disabled, right? An example of that is like the old user profile. Like, it used to work one way, now it works a totally different way. That's an example of a breaking change. Doesn't mean we broke something accidentally, we intentionally deprecated old functionality, okay? Of course, we also want to know what was added in terms of functionality. Like, what are new things that users can do? And then finally, what was fixed? What was previously broken but has now been fixed? So these are the things we want to just very quickly be able to look and assess, okay? So this is the current way we're doing release notes. Now, this is actually pretty good. This is most of the way there, okay? But using this as an example, shout out your answer, please. Can someone tell me, did we have breaking changes in this release? Shout out the answer, please.
I think yes,
And why do you say yes?
because I worked on one of them.
Okay, so that's cheating. That's cheating. So you're right. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. For others of you, it may not have been as obvious. How about someone else? Did we fix bugs in this release?
I can't tell from that. Well, I guess I can. So that's the word issue. So I guess that's a bug, fix issue.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, fix issue. So that's not bad, right? We were able to quickly identify that. And then what features, if any, did we add?
Something to do with credit cards.
Something to do with credit cards. Perfect. And then what was the breaking change? Was that Maggie that you worked on it?
It was me.
Okay. So other than Maggie, what was the breaking change?
I can't tell.
Can't tell. Anyone? Okay, that's fine. I won't make you. So we'll we're almost there with release notes. We'll show how to actually level that up even further to make it even easier to tell. Does anyone know? So who knows what ELI 5 stands for? If you know, please say. ELI 5. It's from Reddit. I'm not a Redditor, but I like this concept.
Explain it
Anyone know?
like I'm 5.
Explain it like I'm 5. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. So can someone explain like I'm 5? What does this 1.2.x or v1.8.2? Does anyone know? Or it wants to take a stab at explaining it. What does that mean?
The first one is the major. If there's like a huge, like big change that's gonna break something. The second one is like not as major, but a little, pretty important. And then the last one is like, oops, there's a little bug. Don't worry about it. We took care of it.
Perfect. Absolutely right. So these are examples of what's called a semantic version number or semantic versioning. Semantic just means it has meaning imbued in it, right? So another way to say it is meaningful version numbers. And that was Marufo, right?
Yep.
Perfect. So Marufo is exactly right. So it breaks down as major.minor.patch. And the formal definition of those is a major change, as Marufo correctly pointed out, is something that breaks previous or existing functionality. It's not backwards compatible is another way to explain that. And then minor means we've added functionality. Okay. And then patch, added or changed functionality. And patch is just bug fixes and a category of other stuff that's not necessarily user impacting, which we'll talk about. But patch is just bug fixes. We didn't add anything. The stuff that was already there is slightly better. Okay. Any questions about this? The concept of semantic version or semver for short. And the spec, if you just Google like semver, like let me Google that for you. Semver, it comes up with this spec. And it's basically what I just said, right? So all you need to know is major, minor, patch. Okay. So any questions on this? Okay, no questions. So now if we reformat the release note we had before using that standard, we can organize it. So if we do, well, actually, this is not a very good example because the previous release number would need to be something like 3 dot something. So the 4 would indicate we've made a breaking change. So we went from 3 something to 4, indicating there was a breaking change. Okay, so actually but the format is what I want to get across here, not the actual version number change. So in this format, you can see the breaking changes called out. We disabled old user profile. We added 1 feature, and then we fixed several bugs. Okay, so this should be a little bit easier to very quickly look at it and quickly identify were there breaking changes, were there features added, were there bugs fixed. And the way we're able to do that with just not 3 digits, but this semantic version number, you look at the last version number. If the last version number was 410, that means we've added a feature or more. If the previous, for example, this is 4.2.0, if the next release was 4.2.1, what does that indicate? In the next release, if the next release is 4.2.1, what would that indicate? Someone shout out the answer, please.
Bug fixes.
Bug fixes, correct. And what did we not add?
New features or breaking changes.
Well said, Rafael. Exactly right. So this is something we're going to be starting, okay, is versioning our releases with semantic version, okay? So we can track like this, okay? So that's semantic versioning. So any questions on this before we move forward on semantic versioning?
I feel like at the state of the platform now, we're still making a lot of breaking changes. As you saw, this was a relatively small commit, but it's a pretty important one. So could you imagine this major version changing significantly? Like we're going to be at 50 by the end of the year?
Sure, absolutely. Or 130. That's totally fine. Absolutely, totally fine. Now this will, to some extent, the version number will be revving less once we split the front end and back end. So we'll version them independently. Right? So the API will change. So the front end team knows, oh, the API has a breaking change. That means we need to update the front end, right? And the front end, like you said, like we're removing features constantly, the version will go up. It could be could be 1026.0.0. That's totally fine. All we're trying to do is convey, inherently convey information with that version number. Does that make sense?
Got it.
So,
Who's-
and
sorry.
good, please go ahead, jump in. Absolutely.
So whose responsibility is it to determine breaking or not feature? Like, I don't want us to get into this, like, like spend more time than needed on figuring out what's what.
Fantastic question. So I'll answer that question with the next section, which is called conventional commits. So actually the computer will determine that. Nobody will actually have to decide manually the version number, and I'll show you how that's going to work. So that's a fantastic question. Absolutely. But and again, they're like conceptually, if we remove a feature, like that's a breaking change, like, or the old profile, like we remove that. So, think about it this way, from a customer perspective, is this something we need to tell the support team about? So that when customers are like, hey, I can't change my profile the way I used to be able to, right? So it's who is the customer? Is this breaking something from their perspective? So if that's the front end team, it's actually the back end API. We change the URL for this endpoint. Well, the front end team needs to know about that. If it's like the support, if this the user profile, we've completely changed it, and the old one's no longer accessible, and that was being used by the customer service team. We call it CX team. Customer experience team needs to know about that. So it's not for features. I would say it's not as what am I trying to say? Ultimately, there'll be a value judgment that need to be made, but in practice, it won't actually be that difficult. Okay, and I'll show you who automatically determines the version number. Okay, any other questions on this? Great questions, by the way. Fantastic questions. No, okay. So yeah, so next we'll talk about something called conventional commits. Okay, so how do you scale? Let's say you have 100 engineers or 200 engineers working on a project, like Angular or React or one of the other frameworks, or even, I don't know, whatever. Insert big, huge open source project here. And how do you manage that? Like, how do you actually manage all these changes? Do you have someone who just like stays up late at night, like looking through commits? Well, no. Some very smart people came up with this convention called a conventional commit, where you're very intentional about the commit message, and very simple format, but you use this format so that computer systems can automatically parse out that information and determine, was it bug fixes, was it features that were added, or was it a breaking change, as well as a bunch of useful metadata that we'll talk about. Okay, so broadly, the very first line of your commit message is a type, and I'll show you what the types are. Well, there's three. I'll tell you what they are. The three main types are breaking change in all caps. So it's like, it's clearly going to grab your attention. FEAT, feature. And the third is fix. So there's breaking change, feat, and fix. And then a very, very short message, as short as possible. Okay. And then you give it a new line, a blank line, and you can add a body. So here's where you can put all the details. You could write as much prose as you want. You're unconstrained. Put as much detail as you think is relevant for, imagine the what do you call them, archaeologists of launch good in the future, like dusting off this old fossil of code that you wrote, the dust, big dust cloud, and say, oh, okay, I see why this is there, right? So put as much detail as you think is relevant for someone who has zero knowledge to understand later. And then footers, which can be one or more. This is where you put metadata, for example, what bugs you fixed. So one commit could actually fix 5 bugs or 2 bugs or just 1 bug, or close one issue that's related to one feature, or potentially even add 3 features. That's fine. You should just put those in the footer. So you link the issue in the footer. Okay, that's where the metadata goes. Okay, so this is generally the format. So any question, and I have lots of examples, and we'll do a live example as well, but any initial questions on this format? Okay, so here's like a look at using the actual release notes. Here's like what that would look like. So, and I've got the video on my screen, so I can't see. How can I make this really small? There we go. Okay, disable old user profile for security reasons, right? Now, there's an additional thing which I didn't mention in the previous slide. There's the concept of a scope, and this is all in the spec, right? By all means, go read the website. It's only like one page. It'll take you like 15 minutes. It'll take you like 10 minutes tops, okay? But there's an optional concept of a scope, and the scope is something we have to agree on. So one of our homework items after this call, figure out what are the scopes of the current launch good platform. Like user profile is clearly one of them. Probably Friday givers or even recurring giving, we have to decide. And PMs can also help with this, right? We decide what are the scopes, what are the kind of areas of our product, okay? And that's optional. So the parentheses with the scope inside, that's optional. But probably in our case, we'll probably almost always use that as soon as we define what those scopes are, okay? So disable old user profile for security reasons. That was clearly a breaking change. We removed a whole set of features that used to exist. This was related to the user profile area of the product. And then this is a bogus message because I didn't really know the details. And then notice the footer. So there were several tickets that were fixed by this. And those are just made up numbers. But GitHub has very intelligent tools for automatically connecting the dots when you commit with fixes or fixed or closes. There's like 5 or 6 different keywords you can use, a £, and then either a PR or an issue number. GitHub will automatically connect all the dots and link it all up very beautifully. Okay, so the footer's where the metadata goes. It can be one issue, multiple issues, or it could say relates to like, so fixes, by the way, fixes, when you do that, it automatically in the pull request in GitHub, it automatically attaches the issue number to the pull request. So let's say it fixed these 2 issues, 241, 280. In the pull request on github.com, you'll actually see issues, and then it'll tag those issues. So it actually creates a link there. You may also just want to reference like depends on PR £123, right? Like that's like a real thing that happens. Like you're waiting for another PR to be merged before this can be merged. So you can actually mention that, those kind of metadata details. Okay. Another example. So this was the card. This is a great new feature, very important, to prompt the user to update their card if it's associated with active club or challenge. Okay. And then I put some details, right? So this is like, these details are, I think, reasonably real. No flux capacitor in that. Okay. And then here's another example from the actual change. User profile page, donor list, multiple issues, right? That's what it said before, which is great. So then say all the things we did, right? And then here's all the issues that it closed. Okay. And then finally, one more just for good measure. Here's what it would look like with no scope. Fix Friday Givers Club incorrect label. Okay, change button text from leave challenge to leave club. Okay, any questions on those examples or broadly on conventional commit thus far?
So the fixed number, is that using Jira for example, our tickets are labeled LG-something something. Is that what you put there?
Yes, you would put that there. Absolutely.
But
now,
the GitHub alternate, the GitHub
yes,
version of it.
Correct. So yeah, as we transition to GitHub issues, that will just be fixes blah. But if you just put, for now, if the issue's still in Jira, if you just put fixes space and then the LG, just the Jira ticket number, that will be fine. That will give us enough metadata. Right. So that is exactly right. That's the right place to put that metadata. Great question. But once we are on GitHub issues completely, there's a lot of sugar they've built in, right? Because it's one platform. So they built in a lot of sugar around if the issues in GitHub linking it. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Just a quick aside on that topic. Matthew, you had said in a prior meeting that you had already set up an example of the GitHub issues tracking.
Yes,
Could you link that project so I can start
Absolutely.
taking a look at it as well? I know I've been looking at the Kanban boards and Jira, trying to at least get it set up for the temporary transition, but it would be nice to see what it's going to look like ultimately in GitHub.
absolutely. We'll absolutely do that. Yeah, great,
Okay, thanks.
great ask. Any other questions about the examples?
Another thing, I'm just wondering, because obviously you said we could do like fixes, ticket number, but GitHub also has PRs versus issues, and I don't really know how you address an issue, but is it still the # and number? Like, is it going to know the difference between a PR and ticket? Because I've made
does.
commits that also say addresses this number, and it will link to that PR number.
Yes. So GitHub, they had some clever architecture person years ago. GitHub decided whenever they built the platform that the auto increment, the ID number, I don't know if you noticed this, but issues, well, I probably not because we don't use issues today. PRs go in like increment, like 296, 297. But if you open an issue, that will be 298. The next PR is 299. The next issue is 300. So issues and PRs, it knows how to distinguish them because the same ID references either how do I explain this? When you create an issue, that there's a global integer for issues and PRs. When you create a PR, that global number goes up by 1.
So they increment off the same number.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you so much, Eric.
Cool.
They
That's
increment
great.
off the same number, so it automatically knows. That's how it does it. They increment off the same number.
Got it.
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned other types of commits. These are actually very useful, and I personally have used these a lot. I anticipate we will also, other than a breaking change, a feature, or a fix, there are these. So build, actually forget what build is. I think build is related to the build system. This is a point of follow-up. I'm not sure when something would be related to build versus CI, because obviously CI is like continuous integration. I suppose build would be like build scripts versus CI is related to like GitHub Actions. Chore is like, if it doesn't fit anything else, like I moved this file from this directory to this directory, like that's chore, that's fine. And it won't show up in the release notes because like, who cares, you're right? CI is things related to continuous integration, right? Like GitHub Actions, stuff that runs on remote servers as part of the pipeline. Docs is any documentation you've added or changed. Style is like, this file was missing some semicolons, so I added semicolons. That would be style. Refactor, I think we all know what that is. Perf, changes just related to improving performance. And then test is if you've added test coverage or changed the tests. Okay, so these are the other types that are valid, and feel free to use any of them, right? And think for a second when you're doing this, like, okay, what is this actually related to? And there can be multiple, actually, I don't think I showed an example. You can have multiple head, body, and footer in one commit. So it's totally fine to have like feet, as in feature, something, and then space, chore, move files around, space, test, . So ideally, if you have feet, you also have test in the commit, right? You've added a feature and you've added a test for it. That's like the ideal. So there will be multiple blocks in one commit message. It can be, you don't have to, but it's certainly valid. And in some cases, makes perfect sense. If you added a feature and you added the test, like put them in one entire commit that's getting pushed up, and have those defined within your conventional commit. And there's examples of these on the conventional commit website, how to do multiple in one commit. Okay, any questions about these other commit types or broadly about conventional commit? No. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So, I'll just skip this because we're a little bit short on time. Go to the new Angular, probably the old one too, but if you look at the Angular, the Angular 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 through 12, They use conventional commits, and you can see how a huge project with many moving pieces, hundreds of contributors all around the world, they use conventional commits, and you can see their release logs, and it's like really clean and easy to understand. Okay, so how to enforce this? Any ideas? How are we going to enforce this? Ideas? How can we enforce, like, how are we going to make sure that people use conventional commits? Any ideas? Well, here's an idea. Should we just say, hey, Ryan, you have to like enforce all of this? Is that a good idea? Do we think that's a good idea? No,
Probably not.
Probably not. Right. This is what we don't. This is what we don't want to happen. Like, right. We want Ryan to like have a nice work-life balance, and that's not sustainable. Right. That's not sustainable at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a GitHub action that enforces this. Okay. So the computer will look at your, I say the computer, sounds weird. The GitHub action will run when you raise a PR, and it will look at your commit, and it will make sure that it's in the right format, and it'll tell you when it's not. Okay. And I'll show you how to fix it if it's not. Okay. In a second. Okay. So I put a picture of a dictator because the conventional commit checker is kind of like a dictator, right? Like you have to have the right haircut.
Is the rule going to be called Dear Leader?
That's not a bad idea. Dear leader. And this is the slow clap meme. So it's like when you do it correctly, he'll give you a slow clap. Okay.
There you go.
So, okay. Any more questions about conventional commit? Okay. So now you're saying like, well, gee, Matthew, that sounds great, but I don't always get to a nice stopping point where I can actually have one nice commit. What about if I'm working on something for a month? How am I going to possibly ever do a conventional commit? Well, this is like the reality. This is same reality in development, right? This is like the designer version. Uh-oh, what? Why would it? Oh, it's not. I thought it was Zoom. I thought Zoom was asking me to update. That was really annoying. It's like, why would Zoom ask me during a call to update? That seems really rude. Now I don't know how to get back. Yes, fantastic. So this is like the designer version of like, I'm sure we've all been there where you're trying to fix a bug and it's like, change the first commit is very confident. It's like fix bug such and such by blah, 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 blah. And then you try and it's like, oh, that actually didn't work. There's like, that broke something else. And like, try it, fix again. But before you know it, you've got 10 commits. So like, try this, try that, try this, try that. Like that's the developer equivalent, right? So what we don't want to do is our sort of all of our incremental work that got us to the change that is the good change that we want to be evaluated. We don't need people to know how the sausage was made, so to speak, right? We want to do things cleanly with a conventional commit. And so the way we do that is doing something called rebase. So I will show you how to do rebase now. Okay, so you can see here, I just made this fake directory, this fake project. So you can see like I've got this master has this beautiful like conventional commit history. So I go and start working on like feature X, or let's say bug fix X, right? So, I make a change. Okay, oops. So I make a change and I'm like, great. I'm confident that this is the right fix and I'm gonna just go for it. Fix, add nonsense to readme. Okay, great. I'm very proud. I'm ready to pull this. And then someone's like, oh, actually, Matthew, that actually didn't fix the issue. And I'm like, oh, no problem. I'll go in and like, I'll make a couple more changes, right? So I do that. Okay, really fix it this time. Okay, and then like, oh, Matthew, that's so now, okay, well, that it's not as clean as before. And they're like, well, it still didn't fix it. And you get the idea, like this goes ad nauseum. So now I've got a bunch of changes, right? Really fix it. Okay, so yeah, we don't want to push this mess, like fix, add nonsense to readme. Like, okay, that's actually what I did. This is what I want to show up. But I made 2 other commits. Well, what I can do, I personally, just FYI, I wish I had known about this like 5 years ago. I only learned about this within the last 12 months. So what we do is we rebase, and then we pass the -I flag, and we provide master, because -I and then whatever branch you have cut your branch off of. So generally that's going to be master. But let's say you're working on a big project and we have a project branch or a branch that multiple people are working on. You would replace master with wherever your branch originated. Okay. So now we get this interface. Now, what it's asking us to do, it's showing us, here's what's changed since you branched off of master. Okay. So the top one, we actually like that, and there's no issues there. But let's say I actually wanted to add more detail. And so I only did the head. I want to add a body and maybe some metadata. So I'm going to do reword. Okay, so I'm going to use that commit message, but I'm going to reword it. Now the other two after that, they're just related to that. They were just additional commits that I had to make to get it working. So what I can do is a fix up. Okay, and you can use F. There's like a shortcut. You can see the docs below. So it's going to squash all my messy commits into one commit that's all related to the same thing. The stuff that only I care about, my incremental process to get there, to figure it out, we squash all that down, and then I just package that up into one nice submission, one nice project submission. Okay, so you save the file in whatever text editor, make sure you set your text editor so you're comfortable. Whatever text editor you're in, you go line by line, and you can leave if you just want to keep them. You can leave them alone. You can do that. You don't have to change them. But in this case, we're going to reword the top commit message, and then we're going to squash the other two into that commit message. Okay, so I did that, so it understood. So notice it's put them all together. And what we're going to do here is change this commit message. So now I can actually come through several lines of it, whatever. Okay, so now we say previously there was not enough nonsense. Now there is. Okay, and fix that. And here's where you can really, and you can do this as many times as it takes. You don't have to do this just once. You can keep doing this until you get it to look like what you want. And then fixes number 24, whatever. Okay, now if we look at the Git log, you see there's just one commit there. It's nice, it's conventional commit. And if I show the status, there's no changes in the tree. And if I show you the contents of README, notice it has all the changes together. Okay, so this takes some practice, but it's actually, if you are intentional about the changes you're making and you only work on one thing at a time, this will be super simple and you won't have any issues. Okay, where you might get into problems if in the same branch you decide to go work on something completely unrelated and something else, and then you've got commit history where it's worked on A, worked on B, worked on A, worked on B. That is not an easy rebase, right? Because as you saw, I squashed the two commits into the previous. If you have now bounced around back and forth, that becomes less feasible to do. So what I would emphasize here is be intentional about what you're working on. Branches are cheap, they cost you nothing. Create a new branch, right? Like if I want to do a new branch, git checkout B, bug, fix, Y. Like just check out a new branch and do your changes, right? Branches cost you nothing. Use branches liberally. Don't bounce around and work on unrelated things, unless, which you could do, right? Unless, and it's totally okay if you gets to this, if they're kind of unrelated things, but it just makes sense to do it together. You could have multiple, in this commit, I could have this fix is 22, and then another conventional commit. So don't be afraid. If you really need to, you could just have multiple conventional commits in one commit message. So you could, let's say you have like 10 unrelated things, you could squash them all into one commit, but just make sure that you properly put a conventional commit that identifies each of the changes. Okay. So the key here is the commit message communicates sufficient information about the changes you've made, the context, and the related information, not the individual like incremental process to get there of like change this file, change that file, right? So any questions about conventional commit rebase? And by the way, I am just putting it out there. The first time you rebase, feel free to text me, message me. I will help you rebase. Like, don't be afraid of rebasing. Okay. It's actually really, really straightforward. And then once you get the hang of it, you won't even think about it. How come this is not presenting? Present. Okay. So that's what we want to do. However, to do this safely, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. Okay. So the key here is you should never, like, when you rebase, what you're basically doing is you're changing the head associated with your changes. Okay. You're actually rewriting history is what you're doing. So if someone else is like, if you're working in a shared branch and you do a rebase on that shared branch, you will break one of the goals, which we said was not make any changes that undo other people's work. Okay. So to avoid doing that, here's some simple tips to follow. Okay. Treat branches like toothbrushes. Okay. They're dirty, right? Don't share them. Your branch is yours alone. If you need a shared branch, create one. And each of you, whoever's working on it, create your own development branch that's working on that shared feature, but do not share branches. Okay. I want to make that really, really clear. If you never share branches, you'll never have any problems with rebase. I promise you that. Okay. And never push to a shared branch. Okay. Raise a PR. There's no reason to push directly to a shared branch. To raise a PR. You shouldn't be pushing directly to a shared branch. Why? Other people are depending on you. They should be able to review your changes. They should make sure that it passes all the code quality stuff, which we're going to talk about next. Okay. And never rebase a shared branch. Just don't do it, especially not master. Okay. Any questions about rebasing? Okay. I know it may seem that probably some of you have already used rebase in the past. Probably some of you have never even heard of the command. So again, I'm available. Don't be shy. Ask for help. I'll walk you through a rebase. No questions asked. It sounds like a.
Probably like the rest of the people, I'll have questions when I go to do it, I'm sure.
Perfect. And that's good. That's good.
Just a small comment
Yeah,
from
go
my
ahead.
experience. That helped me a lot is at the end of the day, just commit and then in the morning rebase. Because sometimes I'd forget because I was like, oh, this is an ugly commit message. Let me not commit this. But then something happens to your machine, something happens like that. It's got me into the habit of committing earlier on than later on, like having a giant code change commit versus just like separately having a little commit messages after message after message. And then if I feel like squashing them, I just rebase. If not, just commit away. It just gets you in the habit of avoiding that big problem. Like, oh man, this is like hot garbage of a commit message. What do I do?
Great point. That's a fantastic point, Madofor, is just commit to your heart's desire, right? At the end of the day, or whenever you get to it, basically whenever you want someone to review it, you're just going to rebase. So don't worry about like commit message initially are just for your benefit. So you can remember what you did. Before it gets reviewed, you're going to rebase anyway. So fantastic point. Just commit liberally, commit often, push the code. And then when you're ready for it to be reviewed, rebase it and worry about, making a nice message and formatting it at that point, not before. Yeah. Don't always err on the side of committing early and often. Never the opposite. Yeah. Fantastic point, Madofor. Thank you for raising it. Any other comments or questions?
One quick thing, when in doubt, sometimes when I've done this too, and I've do weird branch juggling, you can create a new branch and it's basically a copy, a backup of what you had, as long as you made commits. So if you're worried about making a rebase, I think you could make git checkout -b, make a temporary branch, do your rebase, and worst case, you can still go back to your previous branch, right?
Great point. Fantastic point. Yeah. And in fact, maybe that's a great thing to just do as practice, especially when you're getting started out with rebase. So yeah, fantastic point. Again, branches are free, so use them liberally. Fantastic. Okay. So any other questions, comments before we move
I had
on?
a question.
Yes, please.
Do you rebase after you push your commits, right? Or do you commit your changes, rebase, then push? Does that make sense?
You can do either. So as long as you follow the rules of don't rebase shared branches and don't push to shared branches. So the branch is yours and yours alone. It's like your toothbrush. No one else should be using it. Okay. It doesn't matter. You can do either way. So if let's say you have 5 commits at the end of the day, you have to turn off your laptop, push them remote. So they're backed up to the remote server. And then when you get around to it, you rebase. Now, when you push, you're going to get a message that says rejected because you are behind or there's a conflict what's in the remote. So you'll need to force push. If you've committed and pushed and then rebase, you'll need to force push because you've actually rewritten history in the remote service saying that's not consistent with, I have like 5 commits, but you're telling me there's 1 commit that's behind what I've already have. So you will get when you do that, if you commit, push, and then rebase, you will get an error message, but don't worry. As long as it's like a toothbrush, no one else is sharing it with you, you won't have any problem. You rebase and force push. It's totally okay. And we'll make sure master's already locked down, but we'll make sure all of the sensitive branches have write protection so no one can push to them directly. Okay. Fantastic question, Maggie. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. So linters, hinters, and IDs, oh my. Okay, so code quality. So this is an area where in the old days, like people had to use somewhat of a crass expression, they had a peeing contest, right? It's like, well, I think it should be, comma first. I think it should be comma last. Like, it doesn't really matter. The key from my perspective is 2 very important things. Number 1, there's a written specification. And number 2, you enforce it consistently. Those are the most important things. Some stylistic preferences are very arbitrary, and it's up for every team to decide what their own stylistic preferences are, write down the spec, and then enforce it. So someone doesn't come in like a month later, like, oh, you guys are using comma last, so that's stupid. Here's why comma first is better. I say, look, the spec is written. This is what we follow, and this is what we enforce. If it's not in the spec, we don't do it. Like everything's according to the spec. Okay, so what doesn't work very well is we just like, hey guys, like remember to properly format your code. Like remember to put spaces before, after the if statement, but before the bracket or the parentheses. Like that just doesn't work very well. Begging people to do it doesn't work. And also if people don't actually read the spec, like that doesn't work either. So the spec has to be enforced. And code has to be written according to the style guide. Like, people can think like, oh yeah, I formatted my code, like I properly indent it, but like, is it following all the rules or only some of the rules, etc. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. So we want to use a technique called static code analysis. So the reason we will do this is it gives us the ability to actually identify potential issues before they become issues, before we even merge the code. We can identify bad patterns of programming. In other words, anti-patterns, we can identify those. This is all before anyone needs to manually review the code, okay? And we can also make sure the developer knows about that. It's one thing if it violates the spec, but we have to tell them and they have to go fix it, right? And we can do this completely automatically, and we start catching these issues as early as possible. In other words, before it requires manual review by anyone on the team. And our ideal here is there's 0 human intervention required for any of these kind of code quality things. Okay, this is like where we want to get to. So there's basically 2 stages early in the process. So number 1 is while you're coding, your IDE can help you. And number 2 is when you're submitting for review, before anyone manually reviews it, the build system will automatically check and review it for you. Okay. So these are the 2 main stages, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. We've got 10 minutes remaining here. So number 1, I think pretty much everyone's using Visual Studio. If you use another IDE, fine, but you have to figure out how to set it up yourself. We will be setting up linters for every type of code that we write. So PHP, JavaScript will be ESLint, and then also CSS and Sass. So Now I got to show you an example. So what does that look like? Now I apologize, this is not Visual Studio. If I showed you in Visual Studio, I would look pretty stupid because I have zero idea how to navigate Visual Studio. So instead, I'm going to show you an Atom, but I assure you it is the exact same experience in Visual Studio once you set up these tools. These tools are standards based. There's a set standard and they work across IDE, across project. Okay, so this is an example of a specification. Okay, there's a couple like ESLint recommended. Well, the publishers of this, of ESLint, which is a linter, let me back up. A linter is basically just a program that checks your code for you. I'm assuming most everyone has heard of the concept of a linter. If you haven't, a linter is a program that runs that checks your code for various things, stylistic, pattern-wise, static analysis, making sure there, you don't reference a variable that's undefined, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's what a linter does. Lint is like, when you dryer, there's a what is it called? The lint trap. It's all the bad things. It pulls those out while it's in the dryer cycle. Okay, so yeah, this is an example. So like we just define what the rules are, like whatever rules we want for our project, we just define them and then it automatically enforces those for everyone. Okay, like for example, the maximum length of any line should be at most 200 characters. Why have a max line? Well, it's easier to read, and then people can discuss like what's the right maximum? Is it 200? Is it 300? Like fine, but whatever it is, we define it and we put it in the specification. So this satisfies the first requirement. There's a written specification, and then second, related to the IDE enforcing it. So if I do like some message equals something, okay. So now right away, my IDE is alerting me what's wrong. Okay, so what does it say? Unexpected var, use let or const. So that's the first error. So let me just actually copy this because I'm going to show you. Okay, so it says use const. Okay, oh, it's still complaining. What's wrong? Assigned a value but never used. Okay, fine. Let's just for the sake of making it happy, to show you the different things it's checking. Okay. Oh, it's still not happy. What's wrong? Oh, missing a semicolon. Okay, fine. Great. Now, actually, I assumed it was going to complain about camel case, but apparently that rule is not turned on in the project. So note to self, turn that on. But you see how right away it alerted me to the issues I had. Now, it gets even better. Wait, there's more, folks. Now, see how that's bad and it's complaining? All I need to do is save the file and it automatically fixed all those issues. It changed the var to a const and it added a semicolon and it'll do a bunch of other stuff like that for you. Okay. Notice it didn't handle the assigned a value but never used because obviously it's not just going to write some arbitrary code to use the value, right? So for most of the rules in a linter, there are fixers and they'll automatically go and fix the things for you. Okay. So yeah, so this is the IDE side. Okay. Now jumping over, because I know we're running short on time. The next stage is the automated checks. Okay. So and by the way, there's also on your local machine, like run lint code. Hold on. Let's see here. Lint.js. Okay, npm run lint.js. Okay, so I can also run it from the command line, and it barfed. Yeah, I don't know what happened. That's fine. Path argument message string received undefined. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. That's fine. So you have your IDE. Your IDE will tell you, and in fact, your IDE will fix the issues automatically when you save. And you also have a command line tool locally, but even more importantly is you have quality checks that will run remotely. And here's where the real power comes in. So these are GitHub actions that run anytime a PR is raised. And what do? Well, they run the linter. They run the linter command for the project and they say, great, it's valid. And then it shows up here as check marks when each action passes or fails. And this button will turn red and say like, warning, do you want to override because the checks have failed? So if your checks have not passed, like why should anyone look at your do a peer review? No one needs to do a peer review until number one, the code quality has checked. And then number two, which is out of the side of the scope of this meeting, but the actual tests, like the unit test, end-to-end test, integration test, etc., the build system will also run those and check them. Okay, so the code quality and all that will be enforced. So you need to, so everyone will be responsible. So this is a homework item. Everyone needs to go set up Visual Studio with at least ESLint. And there's an option that says only run ESLint if there's a spec available, which is reasonable. Like, so ESLint, it won't do highlighting unless there's a spec available. And we will also need to set up PHP lint, which I will be working with most likely Ryan Stedman on, or anyone else on the team who's available. Okay, so that's about linters, both locally on your machine and then remotely. And just to make sure we get through here, that's it. And the final thing is testing best practices with 2 minutes left. The only thing I want to enforce here is in terms of best practices for testing, every single change that goes out to production must be tested on a remote machine, not on your machine. If it's only been tested on someone's laptop, it hasn't been tested. That's the standard. Okay, that's an industry-wide standard. So that is something we're going to be embracing, is every single change needs to be tested on a remote server. And we're going to put tools in place that make doing that incredibly, incredibly simple and automated with almost zero human intervention. Okay, so that's it. We're at time. I can go, if anyone needs to drop off, feel free. This will be recorded. If you have questions and you can't ask them now, I can go for another 15 minutes. So we can do 15 minutes of questions. If you have questions, but you need to drop off, just throw them in the engineering chat and happy to answer them. Questions
I've got
or
one,
comments.
Sorry, I got a question about the linter. You said the homework was to install it on our VS Code. Is there going to be no sort of changes to the what was called the ESLint specification, or are we just going to use it as is? Like, there's going to be no sort of setup from launch good side in that sense.
Great question. So I will definitely take the lead on setting up ESLint for launch good, but it's a living document. Remember, our philosophy is living documentation. So the spec itself will be a living document. We can add specs to it as we like just like I saw, it wasn't camel case. Well, it really should have been camel case. Like, why wasn't my JavaScript in camel case? I'm going to add that. I'm going to actually go add that to the spec. So yeah, we'll absolutely set it up from the launch good side. We'll start with a base of recommendations, but we'll absolutely add launch good stuff. So great question. So yes, we'll definitely customize it for launch good. And if you have any opinions, especially if you have strong opinions about what you would like to see, like there's a page on Notion, which I will link after the call. Like start having that discussion. Like, I would really like to see these 5 things, like space after the if statement. Like I've noticed in our PHP code, for example, we have a mix of like if with the parentheses, right, touching the if, and also with a space. So you guys have to decide. Like, I'm probably not going to be writing any PHP code. So I don't have a voice in that conversation. I don't have a horse in that race. So you guys have to decide as a team, like, which is it? It's kind of an arbitrary decision. Just choose what it is. And guess what? If you don't like spaces between them, that's fine. Your IDE is going to do it for you. So fantastic question. We'll have that conversation in Notion. I'll set up a page for that.
Obviously, what we have now is not going to match the standards, whatever we settle on, because we're going to change something. With the tools that we'd set up on GitHub, are they going to automatically reject everything, or are they going to only check the lines that are changed? Make sure.
Great question. Yeah, great question. The goal is the latter, to only check what's been changed. I know for a fact, because I've used them in the past, there are tools that will do that. They will only look at the diff, and they'll only make sure that the changes match the spec. It's a research topic that's in my court. So fantastic question. So yeah, don't think from day one we're just gonna like everyone just spend a month like reformatting the code. Like, no, we won't do that. we won't make people suffer through that. And also we won't punish people for, files that are old and haven't been touched. The ideal is the latter, what you stated is only changes you've made, the spec applies to those changes. So the spec will enforce the standard on the changes you made. Does that make sense? I think that answers your question. Yes.
Yep. And also I'll have to look into it, but I would say everybody can install ESLint if you want to, but I know that we can set up, like we do have a standard configuration that's in the repository, and we can add the recommended plugins. And then the next time you pull it down, it'll say, hey, there's a plugin that's recommended. Do you want to install the recommended ones?
Oh, that's
So
great.
I would say if you want to, you can go ahead and do it in VS Code, but if you're worried about getting the right version or whatever else, one of us will take that, or whoever installs it could even make a PR, because I think it'll show a diff to one of the config files. And if you make a PR, then we can review and make sure the version looks right and it looks good, and then we'll just add it and then everybody will have it. So yeah, I
That's
guess anyone
great.
could do that.
That's even better. That's even better. Yeah, that's fantastic. That goes all zero human intervention. Like, I'm all about that. That's fantastic. Cool. Other comments, questions?
I guess another one. So you're going to take the lead on setting up the VS Code or the GitHub portion of it, the linter?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll set that up, as well as the conventional commit linter. So yeah, I'll take the lead on that. And also the ESLint ECMA spec. Like the spec will be slightly different for, Angular.js for the browser versus, any sort of backend like Node.js, or certainly TypeScript if we write TypeScript or other things. So there'll be a couple different, slightly different linter spec. So I'll take care of that, but someone will need to take the lead on the PHP, and then probably Zara will need to take the lead on Zara, or sorry, I'm sorry for forgetting. Who is the other person? Who?
Ruffle.
Oh, Raffle. So to take the lead on, so you two will have to get together and come up with, what's the standard that we want for the SAS CSS. I like
question
from Raffle. Yes.
A quick question I had was when you were showing the outline of how the commit messages should be structured. Is that posted somewhere?
Yeah, it's just conventional commit. Just Google it. First
Okay.
result. It's a full spec. It's
I'm
a
sorry, I must have
formalized
missed
spec.
that.
Oh, no worries. So it's a formalized spec. It's not something that I've come up with. People much smarter than me and much more experienced than me have come up with it. And projects that are 10x or 100x any project I've ever worked on use it, and it's apply it very successfully. And I don't know if I emphasize this, but our build tooling, actually, it's already working in at least one of our repositories. So the build tooling automatically looks at those commit messages and creates a release. So here's an example. So the build tooling automatically looks at the conventional commits and produces this documentation. So you would see features, and also if we use scope, it will automatically group it by scope. So it'll say, for example, recurring giving, user profile, I don't know, whatever the other areas are, those will show up. I can't think of other areas right now, but those will show up specifically of what changed for that specific scope. So the build system does all of that. We don't need to do anything. And notice here, like nicely, like, okay, if I want more details, like I just click there and I can see what the changes
sharing
were.
your screen, Matthew?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm notorious for doing that, for showing a demo and then my screen's not ever on. So, okay. So here's one of our LaunchGrid repositories. The build system is already set up. So it takes those conventional commits and generates, when we cut a release, it generates the release notes automatically. So remember, that was from the demo from Ryan. That's really the only thing that's really manual today, is sort of the process of looking and inspecting and then compiling release notes. The build system will now do that automatically for us, and it'll group it accordingly into those buckets, as well as additionally, it's not reflected here because we're not using scopes in this repository, but if it's like user profile, payments, etc., it'll group by those scopes as well. So you'll very quickly So when we publish the release notes to the whole team and even to our customers, the things they care about, they can just look, oh, I care about payments, or I care about recurring giving, or Friday givers, or whatever. It'll just show up and they can see what the changes were. And again, no human intervention at all required. It's all automatic.
You said you're going to work with the PMs to generate that full list of scopes, correct?
That's correct. That is correct. That's on my plate to do. Exactly right.
Cool.
Yeah, and then we'll have everyone review them, of course. Right. If we think, yeah, because we want to settle on those. We don't want those to change. We certainly don't want the names to change, but if it's not comprehensive, that's okay. We can always add scopes, but changing scopes, of course we can do it, but you can obviously imagine the downside that there wouldn't be continuity if we change the name of something, but it's okay. So we'll come up with a list.
So to that point, I feel like some of these things we could probably start doing today. Like we could try to just get in the habit of doing these conventional commits and stuff. But like, well, if we do that, we need to not use scopes, but we could at least start formatting our messages. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree with that. So starting today, like everyone start using conventional commits. It's okay that we're not using scopes originally. I agree 100%, Ryan. Let's just start. Everyone should start doing conventional commits. Don't be shy if you need help. Like this is not, I've tried to present it what I think is a straightforward way. If you're confused, if you need help rebasing, if you're not sure how to write a conventional commit, do not be shy. LaunchGit has brought me on as a resource to help you to be more productive. So don't be shy. PM me. I'll help you get it done. Don't be shy. So start doing conventional commits today. Don't wait. Start doing conventional commits today, and we'll throw in automatically generated release logs.
But wait, there's more.
Well, wait, they're all for the low price of occasionally rebasing. Great. Other questions, comments? Jokes? Question, comments, or jokes?
Wow, not even a joke.
Oh, man.
If I could find a quick GIF of the inflatable flailing arm tube guy,
Wacky waving inflatable tube
There you
arm,
go.
man.
I can never remember how to say
We are
it.
currently overstocked on all wacky waving inflatable tube arm, man.
Everything must go.
Everything must go. Other questions, comments, and feel free, like something comes up after the fact, ask in Slack. That's where we communicate. I'll start the Notion page where we'll start compiling so I think first we can do it in prose. We'll just do bullet points of like what we'd actually like to do in terms of PHP and SAS and also JavaScript. And then, people can comment there like, I really feel strongly about, space after the if before the parentheses. That's the example I always use. Or this is a controversial one. Does the curly bracket go on the same line as the if statement or on the next line? Ooh, you guys will have to fight it out. I don't care what you come up with.
That's
you gotta
going to be
decide.
World War III. That's going to be World War III.
World War III. That's right.
I was wondering if maybe we should, if there are going to be Slack comments, if maybe we just want to like start a thread and keep everything in a single thread regarding these. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. So I said, let's not do a Slack thread in terms of discussion. Let's do the discussion right on Notion. Cause like we'll create,
Notion,
we'll do the proposal. Like here's like, everyone can just put a few bullets of what they want or what they think. And then we can just have the discussion on the document right there. But then, like if there's just questions ad hoc that come up or something you're not clear on, please drop it in Slack.
Yeah, that's more what I was referring to. Just
okay, great. Yeah.
General questions.
And there is a comment feature in Notion, which is very helpful if it's a comment about a specific thing on the document, rather than go to Slack and say, hey, regarding the second paragraph and the third word, I was thinking it just boop, hit it and hit the little, I don't know what you call it, the domino menu. I don't know what that's called. It looks like a number 6 domino, right? It's like, not domino, what would it be? I don't know. A dice. It looks like a number 6 on a dice. Click that, and there's a comment, and then you can also tag people. So if you want to fight the holy war on curly brace on the same line or the next line, like feel free. Like Muslims, we have enough factions already. I'd hate to see Muslims divided over curly braces, but fine. If people want to fight that war, like, go ahead. Whatever you guys come up with, except for JavaScript. It's on the same line, ma'am. Sorry. Otherwise, you'll be excommunicated. We'll declare takfir on you for not being a real JavaScript programmer. No, I'm kidding, of course. I hope no one's offended by that joke. Okay, any question, other questions, comments? Zara was shocked. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay. All right. So this will be recorded. We'll post this. We're gonna create a Notion page shortly after the call. Anything else? I'm available on Slack, and yeah, that's it. And then the next session, I think, Eric, what's the next one? Is it the documentation?
Yeah, the half-hour session's on Thursday, I think at 1:30 as well.
Okay, great. So that session, so feel free, if you don't feel comfortable on Notion, feel free to wait until that session. I'm gonna do an intro to how to really use Notion, some of the powerful tools that are built into Notion, and really be productive in terms of creating documentation, how to use Notion.
2 o'clock, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, that's it. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care.
Assalamu.
Alaikum.
Assalamu.
Thanks,
Thank
Matthew.
you.
Welcome. Thank you.